There are so many mysteries in the Star Wars universe. One question I often hear is why didn't Darth Vader find Obi-Wan Kenobi when he was hiding out on Tatooine? After all, Obi-Wan was one of the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy. Also, Tatooine is literally the home planet of Anakin, so why did Vader never get the idea to go look for Obi-Wan there? Thus, many fans think it's weird that Vader never located his former master, or even that it's just a dubious plot device. However, there are actually some very good reasons why Obi-Wan escaped detection. In this video, we'll analyze how Obi-Wan lived on Tatooine, and what choices he made compared to other survivors of Order 66. After Order 66, Darth Vader and his Inquisitors made it their mission to hunt down the galaxy's remaining Jedi. Eth Koth, Luminaya Unduli, and Jocasta Nu were some of the many high-profile Jedi who eventually suffered a violent fate. Obi-Wan wasn't the only survivor, but he was one of the most effective. He was also almost unique in that he managed to retreat into exile again after going head-to-head with Vader twice on Mapuzo and Jabim. But how did he achieve this? The main reason why Obi-Wan escaped undetected for so long was that he didn't use the Force in any significant way. This may seem obvious, but it's how most Jedi survivors instantly gave themselves away. In the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, we see the Jedi Nari publicly use the Force to save a child. This was a fatal error because it immediately attracted the Empire's attention, and ultimately, the Grand Inquisitor executed him. Obi-Wan actively suppressed his connection to the Force when he settled on Tatooine, so there was no chance of the Emperor's forces detecting him. Obi-Wan didn't create any noteworthy ripples in the Force, so he didn't give Vader or Palpatine anything to sense. He actually went too far because it came at an intense personal cost, as he lived in a state of intense guilt. That's why he struggled to use the Force again during his duel with Vader on Mapuzo. He only survived because his former Padawan allowed him to. Obi-Wan even went as far as burying his lightsaber in the Dune Sea to truly sever any physical connection to his Jedi past. He also worked at Tiburon Station, a sand-whaling outpost, one of the least glamorous jobs in the galaxy. Nobody had a reason to think he was anything but an ordinary human living on one of the most depressing planets in the Outer Rim. We know from the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show that the Jedi Master eventually leaves Tatooine at Bail Organa's behest. We won't go through his entire adventure because you can just watch it. However, what is most interesting for this discussion is how he managed to return to his quiet existence on Tatooine after almost killing Darth Vader. This was mostly down to Obi-Wan's discipline. His self-control was remarkable because he barely used the Force in canon while on the sandy desert world. There are a couple of instances, including a showdown with Jabba the Hutt's thugs during the Great Drought in the Marvel Star Wars comic book series. The crime lord sent his minions to extort the Lars family during this crisis, and Obi-Wan intervened by subtly using the Force to cause the thugs' weapons to misfire. Later, the criminals returned to the Lars homestead because they believed Uncle Owen was responsible. Obi-Wan sensed that Luke was in danger and used the Force to disable the assailants. He also blew the lights on their land speeders so they couldn't detect or identify him. After this, he decided against going into town anymore because he didn't want to risk any connection with the incident. There are two major occurrences when Obi-Wan uses the Force on Tatooine. First is when the bounty hunter Black Krrsantan kidnaps Owen Lars in the Marvel comics. Obi-Wan pursues the Wookiee and uses the Force to push Krrsantan while also saving a falling Uncle Owen. Even more dramatic is his duel with Darth Maul in the Rebels TV show. This battle is short and sweet, but still manages to be one of the most emotional on-screen moments in Star Wars history. It's totally reasonable to wonder why the Empire's Jedi hunters didn't notice two powerful Force users battling each other. However, the duel is isolated, emotionally silent, brief, and completely disconnected from Imperial awareness. Tatooine is so far from the Empire's center of power that they wouldn't notice a ripple. Usually it's sustained use of the Force that attracts attention, like Kanan Jarrus in Rebels, or else a public incident like Cal Kestis saving Prof on Bracca in Jedi Fallen Order. Ultimately, Obi-Wan's discipline protects him more than anything else. When he does use the Force, it's only as a last resort, and even then, he is clever about it. Of course, Obi-Wan develops his own skills throughout this period, too. Qui-Gon Jinn appears to him as a Force ghost after he defeats Vader. We can only speculate, but Obi-Wan likely spends a significant amount of time meditating and attempting to achieve balance as he learns to follow the living Force. Another key reason why nobody detected Obi-Wan on Tatooine except for Maul was because of his mission. Many surviving Jedi struggled to let go of their training. I'm not just talking about their use of the Force, but also their social conditioning. One of the most obvious examples of this is the unfortunate Nari in the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series, because he can't help himself. Obi-Wan advises him to throw his lightsaber away in the desert and to essentially forget about the Jedi. In the first episode, he even tells Nari the fight is done, we lost. The reality is that Obi-Wan actually believes this because he was trying for a decade to connect with Qui-Gon, but his emotional turmoil prevented him. Nari exposed himself by intervening with the Force when the Grand Inquisitor was already on Tatooine, but he's by no means the only Jedi to suffer this fate. Many give themselves away because they can't resist doing the right thing. The likes of Kanan Jarrus, Quinlan Vos, and Jax Paven actively helped their fellow survivors or openly resisted the Empire. It's easy to call these Jedi naive for their actions, but most of them were effectively indoctrinated to follow a worldview from very early childhood. It's very difficult to override that. There was one good reason why Obi-Wan didn't do this, and his name was Luke Skywalker. Obi-Wan commits 19 years of his life to watching over the young Luke because he knows it's the most important task he could undertake. The only time he goes off-world during this period is to rescue Luke's kidnapped twin sister Leia. At the end of Episode 3, Yoda and Obi-Wan agree that Anakin's children were the last hope of defeating Emperor Palpatine and Vader. It was crucial to protect their identities so that their father wouldn't discover they were alive. Obi-Wan's mission kept him sane because he watched over Luke and even rescued him from precarious situations several times. When Owen Lars resisted his efforts, he continued to protect and monitor the young Skywalker. This and his training with Qui-Gon also likely kept him sane while he was living in the wilderness alone for so many years. Don't underestimate the significance of this mission to Obi-Wan, because so many Jedi lost their sense of purpose after Order 66. Obi-Wan famously described Mos Eisley as a wretched hive of scum and villainy. It's a line that's become so iconic that many fans apply it to Tatooine as an entity. This sandy desert world isn't most people's idea of a paradise. However, it was the perfect planet for Obi-Wan to hide on for several reasons. Firstly, it's deep in the Outer Rim, away from Imperial control. The Hutts dominated it for centuries, and the Empire didn't mess with them. Hutts were famous for their neutrality and had no desire to expand their empire. They were content to remain in their corner of the galaxy, making as much money as possible through whatever means. This also meant that Tatooine didn't have a permanent Imperial garrison. There were definitely collaborators and Imperial spies present in urban centers like Mos Eisley and Mos Espa, as we see in Episode 4 and the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show. But usually the Empire left sleepy, isolated worlds like Tatooine to their own devices. At most, they would infrequently patrol them, but otherwise there was no benefit in stepping on the Hutt's metaphorical toes. Yes, there is a surge in Imperial activity on Tatooine in A New Hope, but this is only because the Empire is desperately searching for the stolen Death Star plans. One of the main arguments people make about Obi-Wan's successful exile on Tatooine is that it was too obvious. They point to it being Anakin Skywalker's homeworld, and that surely he would later think to search for his old master. However, we can debunk this theory with some very strong counter-arguments. Tatooine offered nothing but painful memories for both the Jedi and Sith incarnations of Anakin Skywalker. It's notable that Darth Vader opts against going down to Tatooine in pursuit of potential survivors in A New Hope. He has no desire to return to the planet that he escaped when he was 9 years old. We all know how much he hated sand. But the main reason why he avoided Tatooine was that he believed he had failed his mother. Anakin always carried a tremendous sense of guilt after he left Shmi behind while he pursued Jedi training on Coruscant. This was amplified when he eventually returned and discovered that Tusken Raiders had captured her. He felt as if he betrayed her, and it triggered his first irreversible step toward the dark side. In Episode 2, he brutally massacres an entire camp of Sand People, including their women and children, in a shocking explosion of rage and anguish. James Luceno's Legends novel, Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, gives a fascinating insight into his mindset. In the epilogue, Qui-Gon Jinn appears to Obi-Wan and explains that Vader will never set foot on Tatooine again because of the memories that continue to haunt him. This text is no longer canon, but I think it remains consistent with several other works related to this topic. Greg Pak's Darth Vader comic books offer an in-canon perspective. Throughout the series, he revisits Naboo, Padme's homeworld, and Mustafar, the site of his rebirth. These were traumatic moments, but nothing compared to losing his mother. Charles Soule's 2017 canon novel, Darth Vader, presents the same insights. Crucially, there's practically no mention of Shmi or Tatooine at all, because he compartmentalizes his memories. The Skywalker, A Family at War reference book also solidifies Shmi as the core emotional anchor of Anakin's childhood. His Sith identity is framed as an attempt to bury his vulnerabilities, not to heal them. It was a genius strategy for Obi-Wan to hide on Tatooine because Vader wanted nothing to do with the world. Finally, what about Obi-Wan's cunning alias, Ben Kenobi? I think it's fair to say he could have been a bit more creative when he came up with a new name. However, let's also give him some credit. Most of the people he encounters on Tatooine, including Jawas and traders, know him as Old Ben. The Lars family referred to him as Ben Kenobi, but he had to identify himself when he first brought Luke to them. The name really wouldn't mean anything to anyone else. Firstly, the Empire isn't doing a census of every old hermit in the galaxy. Sure, Tatooine only has about 200,000 inhabitants, according to Star Wars Journey Through Space, but many of these are working for criminal gangs like the Hutts, so it's mostly a lawless state. This made it the perfect world to hide in. Just ask Dr. Evezin in the Mos Eisley Cantina. After all, he had the death sentence in 12 systems. Yes, but Obi-Wan was one of the 2 most famous Jedi in the entire galaxy. That's a fair argument, but don't underestimate how the Empire suppressed any mention of the Jedi Order after Order 66. Tatooine was also extremely far away from the Clone Wars and government centers. Basically, nobody would look twice at Obi-Wan as long as he didn't give himself away. Tatooine's proximity from the core worlds made it the perfect hiding place. One of the key factors in Obi-Wan's long-term survival came from a very unlikely source. That's right, I'm talking about Emperor Palpatine, or Darth Sidious, himself. He absolutely didn't want Vader going after Obi-Wan for several crucial reasons. The first was quite simply because Obi-Wan was too powerful. There was no guarantee that Vader would beat Obi-Wan in a lightsaber duel in the early years of his exile. Obi-Wan has an outstanding head-to-head record against Vader. He emphatically defeated Anakin in their epic duel on Mustafar, leaving him for dead. He also defeated him again in their third duel when he was rejuvenated with the Force in the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series, again leaving Vader in a stricken state. The only duel Obi-Wan truly loses to Vader is his second, and that was because he was in a compromised state. Anakin, or Vader, was a more aggressive duelist than Obi-Wan and more powerful in the Force, but Obi-Wan was a better strategist and in greater control of his emotions. He used the defensive form Seresu brilliantly to defeat Anakin on Mustafar. Then, in their third duel on Jabim, he switched from his classic Seresu to the more aggressive Ataru, catching his old apprentice off guard. It's possible that Vader would have defeated the aged Ben Kenobi outright on the Death Star, but ultimately Obi-Wan's sacrifice is his victory. This is why Emperor knows that allowing Vader to pursue his old master is simply too dangerous. It's also extremely risky for Palpatine because Obi-Wan is one of the last surviving emotional connections with Vader's past. This is why he's so quick to describe the Jedi Master as a mere distraction in the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show. He doesn't want Vader anywhere near Obi-Wan, in case it triggers his past traumas. Obi-Wan is a stark reminder of one of Vader's greatest failures, the death of Padme Amidala. Palpatine wants to ensure his control over his apprentice. Any encounter or obsession with Obi-Wan would make Vader unpredictable. Even if Vader defeated Obi-Wan, it wouldn't necessarily benefit Palpatine. Sure, it would provide closure for the Sith Lord, but then his rage might cool to clarity. Palpatine didn't want this because he wanted to exploit his apprentice's pain. A final key reason why Palpatine feared Obi-Wan is because of the risk that he would entice Vader back to the light. This might sound crazy, but it's not impossible. Obi-Wan was like a father figure and then a brother to Anakin before his fall. Luke proved that there was still good in Vader despite all of the atrocities he committed throughout his life, from sterilizing the Geonosians to literally destroying Alderaan. Palpatine was pragmatic enough to recognize this tiny spark of light in his apprentice. Don't forget that Anakin believed he committed a noble act by joining the Sith to save Padme. There was always the risk that Obi-Wan would convince Vader that Palpatine had manipulated him. This was the Emperor's worst-case scenario, so keeping him away from Obi-Wan was the easiest way to ensure that this didn't happen. It's possible that Palpatine himself could have secretly hunted for Obi-Wan, but even this would have come with a sense of risk that Sith doctrine prohibits. As we know, Obi-Wan wasn't the only Jedi to survive Order 66. It's worth looking at some of the others who also endured, albeit with mixed success. Master Yoda is one of the most obvious starting points because he went head-to-head with Darth Sidious in one of the saga's most thrilling duels. Like Obi-Wan, Yoda went into exile on a very isolated planet. However, Dagobah is a very different world from Tatooine. It had no sentient population, but it did have an extremely potent dark side presence. This made it almost uniquely suited to hiding a Jedi Master. Yoda used the swamp planet's chaotic force energy as a shield against the Empire. Again, it may seem counterintuitive, but Palpatine didn't really want to find Yoda either. Matthew Stover's Revenge of the Sith novelization is no longer fully canon, but it gives a fantastic insight into how the destruction of the Jedi Order broke Yoda. Palpatine believed Yoda was too old and purposeless, so he was content to leave him to die alone because fighting him one-on-one again was too risky. He also didn't want to send Darth Vader anywhere near Dagobah because the planet's dark side presence was just too dangerous and unpredictable for his emotional apprentice. There's also no reason why it would attract their attention. There are many worlds in the galaxy with dark presences that the Sith ignored or avoided, from Dathomir to Yavin 4. Yoda survived because he was strong enough to endure this malign environment. Meanwhile, like Obi-Wan, he didn't create dramatic ripples in the Force. There's a deviation in Timothy Zahn's Legends novel Vision of the Future, as George Cardus tells Talon Karrde how he watched Yoda defeat an insane dark Jedi on Dagobah in a prolonged and terrifying battle. However, this is no longer canon, which actually makes sense. As cool as it is to imagine Yoda in such an epic fight, it would almost certainly have brought the weight of the Empire down on top of him. Another Jedi who makes an interesting comparison is Eeth Koth in the Darth Vader comic book series. A former member of the Jedi Council, Koth cast aside his loyalty to the Order as he became a priest and started a family. However, his decision to have a child cost him dearly, because it immediately attracted the attention of Vader and his Inquisitors. Koth bargained with Vader, even offering to help hunt hidden Jedi in return for protecting his family. Vader refused, and the pair fought an intense duel to the death, with Koth flirting with the dark side in his desperation to save his loved ones. Even though he wasn't truly a Jedi, he lived too publicly, and this cost him everything. Obi-Wan and Yoda only maintained their freedom through their near-total self-isolation. This was in stark contrast to Jocasta Nu, the last chief librarian of the Jedi Archives. She made the noble but fatal decision to return to the Jedi Temple to locate a holocron with the names of Force-sensitive children from across the galaxy. Ultimately, it cost her life, although she did successfully convince Vader to destroy the holocron instead of giving it to the Emperor. Many other former Jedi met a similar fate to Nu. Those who didn't die spent their lives on the run. Ahsoka Tano, Anakin's former Padawan, regularly changed her identity and moved from place to place to avoid detection or capture. We see the same with Kanan Jarrus in Rebels and Cal Kestis in the Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor games. Surviving Jedi had a choice between resistance and anonymity. Obi-Wan and Yoda opted for the latter because of their higher mission to protect the Skywalker twins. This anonymity is what kept them free from Darth Vader's clutches.